What is up, everyone? I'm Ryan from Fireside Yankees with my friend and co-host Dylan Backer, and in today's video, we're talking about the opener. Now, the Yankees used an opener in this series against the Blue Jays. They used Jimmy Cordero as the opener and Johnny Brito as the bulk guy, whatever word you want to use to describe, what his role is. But interestingly enough, the Yankees are in a situation where, Cortez finally turned together a good start. I'm confident he'll turn things around. Obviously, Garrett Cole's pitched at a Cy Young level this year, so you're not too concerned at all about those two. Luis Severino's coming back on Sunday, so that's a nice addition. But you still have Brito and Schmidt in the rotation for a bit until Herman gets back from his suspension. And it raises the question if the Yankees should try using the opener. And even when Herman comes back, one of those two guys are still going to be in the rotation. So, should the Yankees try to use this opener strategy more consistently, at least for the guys who you feel a little less safe with in the rotation, right? They have a pretty deep bullpen. I know at times it gets a little thin, but, with some guys coming back in the rotation, again, if Herman comes back from his suspension, which he will, your pitching staff gets a little deeper. You can tinker around a little bit. There are some guys in AAA I want to talk about that could be helpful in the opener role. And, the success of the opener role in the Yankees in the past, they've used it before. The Dodgers have used it in their World Series run. The Braves used it when they won the World Series. The Astros are probably the last team in recent memory. I don't know if they used a bullpen game in their postseason run last year, but I know a lot of teams in recent memory have. So with that being said, Dylan, the opener was used again against the Toronto Blue Jays. It was pretty successful. I know you have the game log opened up and all that stuff. What are your thoughts on the opener? What are your thoughts on that situation? Do you think the Yankees should use that going forward, or do you think it was just a one-time thing to kind of mess around a little bit?
Right, so, you mentioned that we used the opener the other night against the Blue Jays. Started Jimmy Cordero and then went with Brito as the bulk guy. Cordero, 2 innings of, pretty much just zeros across. You take it, very solid opening start, I guess if you want to call that. And then Brito came in, and for what it's worth, he did well. 5 1/3, he gave up 6 hits. 1 earned run. He gave up 4 total, but that was because of, a couple hits that the bullpen served up. But, with all things considered, he did pretty well. I was okay. I was content with what his performance was. And, I understand why they did it too with Brito because, I saw a stat, the first couple innings of Brito, anytime Brito's in, his ERA is like, very high, like in the 5s or something like that. And then, from innings 4 through 6, his ERA is sub 3. So I see what they wanted to do. They wanted to try to get Brito in the later innings because it seems like that's when he's more comfortable pitching. And it worked. The Yankees ended up winning that game. For the most part, pitched really well, minus a 4-run 8th inning. But, other than that, they did really well, and I think it worked. And I do think it's something they should consider doing, for the time being, because, like you said, Domingo Germán is suspended. We still don't have Carlos Rodon. We still don't have Frankie Montas. Luis Severino is coming back, so that's a huge welcome addition. But, we still have Clarke Schmidt in there. And Clarke Schmidt has obviously not been very good this year. I think a lot of us know that by now, that maybe him as a starter is just not going to work out as a Yankee. He was in the bullpen last year and he pitched really well. They've tried to stretch him back out to a starter. It's not been working. So my theory maybe is to kind of, maybe they could stick to that opener strategy in some of his starts. I'm not saying do it every time because, you need length out of your pitcher sometimes. You don't want to kill your bullpen. But, we've seen Clarke Schmidt is way better, out of the bullpen, when he's, it seems like fatigue plays a factor into some of his, his downsides or whatever in his starts because, he'll sometimes start out the start fine and then as his start gets stretched out, that's when he starts to get lit up a little bit, so maybe if you consider having an opener, like someone like maybe Jimmy Cordero or someone else out of the bullpen, or even Ryan Weber or someone to start the game, and then bring in Clarke Schmidt for a good 4 to 5 innings, I think it could work. I think it's at least something worth trying because, so far him as a starting pitcher to start the game just has not been working. It has not. And quite frankly, I know your starting pitching, your starting rotation is decimated right now, but I don't think necessarily you could keep running out Clarke Schmidt every 5 days for, expect him to give you 5 to 6 good innings when so far we have not really gotten that out of him. So that's kind of my take on it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, one of the big things that Clark Schmidt's also struggled with is left-handed batters, right? So, the Yankees don't have a lot of lefties in their bullpen, but there is one interesting name in AAA that's done really well, and that's Matt Crook. His ERA is well under 2 this year. He's got great strikeout to walk numbers. His walk rate is high, but again, when you have a strikeout rate nearing 50%, I don't think that really matters. He keeps the ball on the ground pretty frequently, and he was a former starter turned into a reliever this year. So, if the Yankees decide to promote him and they use him as an opener, you can force a team to put a lot more right-handed hitters in, and then bring in Clark Schmidt, and now Clark Schmidt can avoid, that big left-handed, those big scary left-handed hitters that teams try to stack against him, and put him in a little bit of a better situation to succeed. And if Crook, again, former starter turned into reliever, can maybe give you 2 innings. If Schmidt can give you 3 or 4, and now you just got to piece it together with the rest of your bullpen. And as you mentioned, you're trying to play to the strengths of your rotation, and right now your rotation's decimated, so you've got to get a little creative here. The Yankees bullpen, when they're healthy, when they have guys back, it's pretty good. Even yesterday, right, they go to the depths of their bullpen. Out of all the guys you expected to get out of a bases loaded, no one out jam with Vlad Guerrero and George Springer coming up, I don't think Ryan Weber was the guy I was anticipating to do that, but that's exactly what he did. Or Albert Abreu getting the clean 8th inning, and then, somehow, some way, just looking like an utterly dominant reliever. It's weird because his stuff looks so good at times, and then he just completely loses it in other times. So, a bit of a weird reliever there, but, the Yankees sometimes are able to kind of go into the depths of their bullpen and claw out wins and claw out outs. So, if you're able to put these guys in better positions to succeed and optimize what they're good at, you may put yourself in a position where you can kind of save your bullpen a little bit. You mentioned the Brito outing, right? What made that outing so important for the Yankees was that had it not been for an error from Gleyber Torres, they probably wouldn't have had to go to Michael Keeney and Hamilton that game. They would have avoided using any of their top dogs in a game against the Blue Jays with their bullpen as decimated as it is. So, you give yourself an opportunity to, save your bullpen a little bit, to, give some guys some rest. And I want to get your take on this. If you're looking at the ideal long man, is it Johnny Brito? Like, I'm assuming, obviously, if Severino stays healthy after Sunday, right, it's like nothing goes wrong there, and that Herman comes back from his 10-game suspension, which, again, it's not an injury, so he will. Now your rotation looks like Cole, Cortez, Severino, Herman. Who's that bulk guy for you in an opener situation? Do you maybe go Schmidt to Brito because they are polar opposites? Brito's bad against righties and Schmidt is bad against lefties, so you kind of stack them a little bit. Do you just go reliever and then go to Brito as the long man, reliever, go to Schmidt as the long man, and throw the other guy in the bullpen? Like, what's your plan if you have the 5th starter role, your other 4 spots are occupied, and we're going with an opener? What is your ideal plan there?
Right. So, it's a little tricky to kind of, make a determination now because we're only 1 month into the season. But if I were to say anything, I think maybe, just maybe, you might need to consider keeping Brito as the, bulk guy in an opener situation. And the reason I say that is because, as far as I'm concerned, Clark Schmidt has clearly been way better as a reliever, and, pretty set in that spot rather than, having him try to be a starter or attempt to be a starter. I view him as more of just a simple long relief pitcher. I don't view him as someone that is worth starting because, like you said, he can't get lefties out, and, you can't really last very long in games if you can't get lefties out. You can't, because then teams just have a simple solution. Let's just stack the lineup full of lefties so they can light them up, and so far that's what's been happening. So, you might need to consider having Brito kind of be the bulk guy, have him be you can have him come out of the bullpen, but, in opener games, bullpen games, have him come in, be the long guy. I know the bullpen is a little shot right now, so doing bullpen games a little more often is going to be tough, and I understand they can't necessarily do that all the time, but I think it's something they need to consider because, without a 5th starter that's clearly, worth still being used, I think you got to do that. I think you got to, possibly go back to using Brito as, what they did the other night, using Brito as the bulk guy and having someone like Jimmy Cordero or Ryan Weber or someone opening in a sense and, being 2 to 3 inning guy to start it and then pass it along to Brito and see how much you can get out of him. I think that's what you need to do, and I know Brito's young, and I know Brito has been, up and down this year. I know maybe a trip to AAA will be necessary for him. I don't know. This is kind of just my thoughts on it. I'm not very high on Clark Schmidt, honestly, as a starter, so that's kind of why I'm more set on Brito already. I know some Yankee fans were already, after one start, were yep, Brito's the long-term 5th guy. I'm thinking, I immediately thought, slow down. We need to see more out of him. And I think I think maybe this opener role type thing for Brito will help him thrive, not only help him develop, help him get a little confidence. I think Clark Schmidt just needs to be a bullpen guy. Simple as that. I don't think it's the Clark Schmidt starter experiment or the Clark Schmidt, bulk guy experiment, whatever you want to call it. I think that's dead. I honestly think it's dead. I don't think it's worth doing anymore. If you just look at the numbers, he was way better as a reliever, strict reliever last year. He was way better. I think you got the best out of him when you did that. I think he has really good reliever stuff. I don't know if his stuff really plays out as big league starter stuff. So it's kind of just my take on it. You may agree to disagree with it, and that's fine. It's a tough conversation to have because, quite frankly, we don't know what they're gonna do because the starting pitching was not expected to be this, shot like this, but it is. So we have to have this discussion of whether they should continue to do it. Something I want to add too. Using an opener is not exactly a bad strategy because the way I see it, if you do that, you have one guy pitch 2 or 3 innings, you have him pitch one time through the lineup, but then you send out a different guy, you're not allowing the hitters to kind of adjust to the specific pitcher throughout the game. They're constantly facing a different arm each time they're coming up, so they have to readjust, and that helps. Obviously you can't do that every single game because, like I said, you don't have an unlimited bullpen. You're going to kill them if you do that every game, but it's something that's not exactly a bad strategy. We saw the Tampa Bay Rays start that trend, a few years ago, and it worked out for them. It worked out, and then every other team kind of adopted it and started doing it themselves because they saw how successful it was. So I do think it's something they should consider doing, more often. The Yankees here I'm referring to, but at the end of the day, we don't know what they're going to do. That's kind of just my take on it. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, end of the day, Clark Schmidt's in an interesting situation where, like, him and Brito have very distinct flaws. Like, Brito doesn't have a breaking ball. Clark Schmidt can't get lefties out, right? So, you wonder maybe, like, in those shorter stints, not only are you seeing less of what hurts them because of the fact that the opener can help counteract that, but, fewer innings, fewer pitches, fewer times to the order, you can kind of ramp up your stuff a little bit more. You don't have to kind of, keep, harder pitches in your back pocket for when you need them. Clark Schmidt can say, hey, you know what? I can hit 94 my cutter. I'm going to sit at 94. Just get through 3 innings, right? As you mentioned last year, he was pretty solid as a reliever. Was the Yankees multi-inning guy. In extra innings, he was a guy they went to frequently to kind of say, all right, here's the 10th, 11th, 12th, like however long this game goes, you're just going to have to pitch through this so that we can save our bullpen. And it worked well for the Yankees. I think of that Cubs game where that game, like no team could score, and Schmidt was able to keep the Cubs from scoring it long enough for Jose Trevino to walk it off. He tried to get a 3-inning save, I think, against the Mets. That didn't turn out too well. He got to the first 2 innings, and that 3rd inning just kind of fell apart a little bit there. But Schmidt does feel like a guy that if you limit his pitch count, if you kind of, take what he is and shorten it, then the efficiency gets a lot better. It's kind of like, when you take a bad starter, because we do the Fireside Yankees pod, so I feel like it's a nice little cross-section here. When you take someone who's not great as a starter and you put them as more of a role player, right? You maximize what they do very well. You're going to get really good production out of them, and suddenly a player that you consider, not very good and not a productive player, when put in a, a less demanding role, can play a lot better. I wonder if that's something Brito and Schmidt can do. Personally, I'm more for sending Brito down when Severino and Herman are both back because I want him to work on a breaking ball, and I think going to AAA will give him an opportunity to, not mess around. And I've said this before, like, it's not like he's not going to take AAA seriously, but he can miss with some sliders and some sweepers or whatever breaking ball he's trying to work on, and the Yankees aren't going to demote him if he doesn't have a great breaking ball, right? It's not like he's going to go from AAA to AA again. He's got some things he's got to work on. I think there is still the potential for him to be a long-term starting option, but that depends on him developing a breaking ball or not. So it's definitely going to be interesting. Now, I wanted to ask you one last question, and I'll keep my answer to this brief. When you're looking at the bullpen right now, right, who's your go-to opener? Like, who's the guy that say, all right, this guy, I want him opening every game? My unconventional answer, when he gets back, I'm kind of for Tommy Canley. I think Tommy Canley would make for an interesting opener because he can get both lefties and righties out. And so, I think he would be an interesting option. I think the guy that's currently on the roster that's healthy would be Cordero, just because he's kind of done it already. So why mess with something that's working well? What are your, who's your guy if you could pick one guy to open consistently?
Right. So, just to kind of mention, your point about sending down Brito, I don't necessarily disagree with it. I'm kind of undecided on what I think about they should do with it, just because, like, it's such a complicated situation because, unfortunately, we haven't gotten good stuff out of Schmidt, and it hasn't been perfect for Brito either. We were hoping at least one of them was going to be, decent. Unfortunately, that hasn't necessarily been the case. So you kind of have, options to mess around with here. And I understand Schmidt is a little more experienced, and that maybe in hindsight they will just end up sticking with Schmidt and hoping that that experiment works out. Who knows what they're going to do about that? I'm open to anything. I don't really have like a strong feeling opinion about it. I just kind of have, what I think they could do. That's kind of my take on that. But, to answer your opener question, I wouldn't mind to see Tommy Kahnle, open some games. I mean, like you said, he can get both lefties and righties out, and that's key to not only being, to starting a game, but, even in just being a multi-inning guy. I wonder if they're going to do it, though, just because I don't know how many innings he'll be able to be stretched out to. That is my one concern with starting Tommy Kahnle as an opener. When he was with us a few years ago, he was kind of like the setup guy. I don't know how much he's been stretched out, whether it was spring training this year or, while during his rehab right now with Tampa. I don't know how much he's being stretched out. I would imagine he's only been pitching like one inning or so each outing. But, even if it is one inning, I wouldn't mind, having him as an opener. That wouldn't be a bad idea. It's definitely something that I would consider. But if I had to pick someone on the roster currently, it would be Jimmy Cordero. Jimmy Cordero did it already once, and it worked out. He didn't get any strikeouts, but he got no hits. He has good ground ball stuff. So I think Jimmy Cordero would be someone to consider as a, main opener guy. I think Ryan Weber is another option. Ryan Weber's been, pretty solid so far. I think in 3 of his 4 appearances so far, he hasn't allowed a run, which is pretty encouraging stuff to see. So I think he's another option you can go to. I think those are like the 2 main guys I would look at as a potential long-term opener, if you want to call it that. But for the time being, I think those 2 can make a difference in this bullpen, because right now, Ian Hamilton on the IL, Tommy Kahnle's still on his rehab. I mean, we're missing a bunch of guys. And we only have, like you said, one lefty in the bullpen, Peralta. Maybe they should call it Matt Crook and make him kind of an opener type guy to make him, start games and get us, off to a good start with some good stuff. It's stuff to consider. There's a lot of stuff to consider. There's a lot of flexibility they have in this. It's up to the Yankees to actually, make that move. There are times, they take a bit to kind of make that decision, or, call up that guy we've been begging for them to call up, or send down the guy we've been begging for them to send down. It take a bit sometimes to make those decisions. I understand you're limited with your options right now, but I do think, with your team finally starting to get their stuff together and start pulling out some wins, I think it's time you start thinking about what's the long-term solution here for this. What's the end goal? What are we doing for this 5th starter spot? Because right now it seems very uncertain. It's very cloudy. We might not have Rodon until after the All-Star break. We might not have Montas until August or September. They got to do something about it. They have to experiment with this a lot. So I understand it's a tough situation for him. I can't necessarily fault them entirely for this because, these injuries are unprecedented. But at the same time, I think they need to start really thinking about what to do about it. And I think it starts with looking at this opener spot, whether it's, you continue doing it or you just stick back to your 1 through 5 with what you have as your starting pitchers. Who knows what they'll do? But that's kind of just my take on it. What do you think about all that stuff?
Yeah, no, end of the day, they're in a situation where it's kind of weird because you don't want to start like just sending down guys left and right or like DFAing guys because they just don't have that many relievers. Like their bullpen's not bad. I don't think it's a bad bullpen, but it's mired in injuries, right? And a lot of those injuries are long-term ones. Trevino, Tommy John surgery. Efros, Tommy John surgery. Jonathan Weisiga out until like August or September with an elbow thing that he had to get removed. It's not like your bullpen reinforcements are coming back tomorrow. Even Ian Hamilton, that's a 4-week thing. That's a month without Ian Hamilton. So, I wonder if it's a situation where, like, the Yankees maybe get rid of a Ryan Weber type, someone who you think is going to pass through waivers. I think he would pass through waivers, and they've done that before. They could do that. Someone might be bound to get hurt, and that might also cause some sort of a roster shakeup. They could send down Nick Ramirez if they wanted to. He doesn't really get much action in the bullpen. But, end of the day, the opener strategy is just more so trying to get Schmidt/Brito into better situations, and that's really what it boils down to. So, we'd love to hear what you guys have to think about it in the comment section below. Let us know who your guys' opener guy is, right? I know Tommy Kahnle's kind of an unconventional pick, but I think he's weird enough of a guy to, and electric enough of a guy to, like, be all good with it. But, with that being said, again, let us know who you guys think the opener could be in the comment section below. Do you think an opener strategy is even the right move to make in the first place? You guys can check us out on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and, of course, our YouTube page and Facebook as well. I don't know if I mentioned that. You guys can let us know. Join the discussion there. Join the discussion in the comment section. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. If you want to listen to this as an audio version, you can check out those platforms for that. And Matt Crook is someone that we talked about in this episode, and we talked about potentially calling him up. Actually, Dylan wrote an article where he discussed maybe DFAing Albert Abreu and potentially looking at Crook and some other guys as potential call-ups. So if you want to read that article and more, you guys can check out Empire Sports Media for all your New York sports content. We don't have just Yankee stuff on there. We have Knicks, Giants, Jets, Rangers, Islanders, all the New York teams you can think of. We appreciate you guys tuning in so much. You guys can check out our personal Twitters. They're above our heads. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.